to talk to Dr. Valentine. And I have to say, before we ask the questions, Dr. Valentine, I want to thank you for one, your willingness to come on to the series, and two, your willingness to break that status quo. I think that with American Heritage College, we are really working on making a change and adjustment to the educational industry and the way people view education. So with that, since this series is talking about the professional mindset, when you think about that, what is your definition of a professional mindset?
Well, first of all, to match your preface to our talk today and our conversation, thank you, Dr. Ferris, for having me. It's so great to be here, and please do call me Amy. I'm really honored to be here with you and your colleagues to share my perspective on professional mindset. So, first of all, when you were doing my bio, and I definitely have a glasses half full attitude. Over the course of the last few years, I've actually changed. That's actually been an area of growth. I'm a glasses overflowing kind of gal now. Even in the pandemic, where there's a lot of challenges and struggles that we've seen, there's as many, if not more, silver linings. And so that's been part of just my mindset in general for my whole life, whether I was wired that way or I learned at a young age. So when we were talking about the theme for this, it's around professional mindset. I was so excited to know that there's a series about it. And I stopped to pause and reflect on how would I define it? What kind of general, broad definition can I give that reflects both my vantage point and then also how people could conceptualize it? Because I think one of the pieces that's easy to take for granted is that we take it for granted.
Yes.
Unless somebody put some time and thought into what is my mindset, we just show up. We show up to work and we do our job. We show up to situations and we deal with them or we don't. And in this advent of probably the last, I'd say, 30 to 40 years, there has been a growing movement around being really conscious decisions that we make. And part of that is how we show. Could be different things for different people, but I think it really encompasses four main elements. One is, well, I'll go through them and then I'll give a little bit. Mind, attitude. Mind would be where and how we make decisions. That's the decision-making part of us. When we show up to work in that situation, or we're a manager at a local retail store that in the pandemic had to really pivot and figure out. Then there's perspective, which I do think is different than attitude. Perspective is, how am I looking at things, not only in this situation, but from a larger vantage point, and then also from different people's shoes. And then the last one is the expertise, and that's what your skills, it's what you know, it's what you were hired for. So for me, an ideal mindset, for myself, is if I'm leveraging mind, attitude, perspective, and expertise in situations. Because if I'm only looking at it from a decision-making lens and I'm not taking into account the perspective, I might not be doing justice to my colleagues. And I think we all can imagine, if we only look at things or primarily look at things through a skills lens, that has implications too. If I'll use the example of a surgeon again. If a surgeon shows up and he does the surgery and it's a great success, but doesn't have a modicum of bedside manner to be able to communicate that, then a little bit that the human interaction piece is lost, which of course the family will be glad about the surgery, but it feels sterile. So I think that these four different components could be applied in different settings. And for me, they've carried me really far through the years.
Very wonderful. Thank you for that. That was great. How do you kind of answered this a little bit for us, but how do you think that a professional mindset has played a part in your career?
I mean, it has been a driving force in my career. It really has, because I as I'm a lifelong learner, obviously, I love to learn. I love to learn in ways that are in the education realm because it adds to what I can contribute. And so as such, sometimes I have selected jobs or positions or a track in my career that maybe I wasn't wholly qualified for, or maybe I needed some development, or maybe I was overqualified. Whatever the case may be,
Yeah.
when it came to my career, I would always follow the path that I felt called to follow. But that doesn't mean it was easy. It's not like, oh, I was, I felt really strongly about being a teacher, and then, it was easy as pie. My first job teaching high school, within the first 2 weeks, one of my students had threatened to kill me. And this was
Oh,
2 years
wow.
after Columbine in Colorado.
Yeah.
And I was 22 years old and he
Wow.
was 17. So the age gap was very small. And I learned the example there is no one else wanted to have him in class. They had known him. He had been labeled.
Mm-hmm.
And I sat him down after he was suspended. And we had a really great heart to heart. And I told him, you can go to any one of these other teachers' classes, or you can stay in my class and never talk to me like that again. And we can come up with a way to interact that if you need a break, I can help you. I will support you, and we can start over from scratch. And he ended up, I know you're not supposed to have it, but he ended up being my favorite student.
Mm-hmm.
And when he got married and had a baby, and we stayed in touch. And when unfortunately, he lost his only sibling a few years ago, and I hadn't talked to him in quite some time, and he called me to read the eulogy because he wanted to make sure that it was articulated the spirit of his brother from this tragic car accident. And of course I did, I mean, without a doubt. And so,
Yeah.
but if my mindset was, I don't like to think that it was stubborn, it was really tenacious. Like, I will make this work. And if this situation, whatever it is, this 1-year teaching position, this job for a company, if it's not meant to fit, but I always show up and I always put my best foot forward, then I'll have no regrets. And that's part of the professional mindset. So it hasn't always been easy, but the difficulties and the challenges helped me more than any of the easiest aspects of it, because I developed equanimity.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't put a price tag on what having equanimity in my professional life does for me.
Wow, that was a powerful story. That brought out a lot. And I thank you for sharing that with us, because I don't think that sometimes we take the time to really think about, outside of ourselves, what people might be going through that's causing them to react and go through life in a certain way. And I thank you for sharing that. And it's beautiful that you developed that rapport relationship with that young man.
Mm-hmm.
You gave him a chance that maybe somebody else may not have done. And like you said, you changed his path for him. So thank you for that. That was just great.
Of course.
Why do you think the professional mindset, why do you think it's important for people to use in their daily lives?
I think I have this analogy of it. It's a beacon. It
Mhm.
guides us. It guides us inside of ourselves. And I don't think that we have to sit down and journal every day about it. And
Mhm.
I don't think it's about that. I don't think it's about, because I think sometimes when you ask people, if you to ask somebody this question who maybe hadn't thought about it, it might feel like, oh, I should have thought about it. Well, I don't know. I should know what that is.
Yeah.
I show up and I put my best foot forward. And there's nothing wrong with that.
Mhm.
But anytime, and this is my experience, anytime we have an infrastructure and
Mhm.
we get to know ourselves better. What are my values?
Right.
What are my beliefs? What are my priorities? And it may be different in my personal and professional life. It may not be the same, but I think ideally we can have having a growth mindset in all that we do,
Mhm.
and breaking free from a fixed mindset across the board. I think, to me, that's the bliss. That's the sweet spot of,
Mhm.
that's why it's important. Because if we're thinking about, am I making a decision from my mind? how am I going to respond to this? Okay, is there a different perspective I can be looking at this? And then where's the expertise I need to leverage here? Then it stops being, I have to do this, or I'm struggling with Joe Smith. And it becomes, I really believe that thoughts turn to things. And so if we're thinking these things like, oh, I have to go to that meeting with all those annoying people, it's going to be terrible, then the meeting isn't going to be good. Even if it is good, we're jaded from it. So and I read a book by an author whose last name I can't pronounce very well, but it's called Flow. And he was an industrial psychologist, and he was fascinated by seeing people and just understanding why they have the perspective they have. So he used he drew a comparison between a businessman who, because of the recession, lost his business, lost his home, lost his money, and unfortunately he took his life. And then he put against that was, in his neighborhood at the Grease Monkey, the manager had worked there for 15 years, was happier than happy could be. Every time that the author would go in there, he was so happy and so content. And it made him say, what is it? What are the distinguishing factors? What makes somebody happy in work?
Yeah.
What is it? And it's a great book. So I don't, there's a lot to it, much more to it than I'm explaining here. But I think that's where the mindset is so important, because we may not be in an ideal job. We may want a new role. We may have a manager that we struggle with, or with the pandemic, there might be components of change that just feel like it's too much. Mm-hmm. But if your mindset is, I can make it through this, I really can learn from this, and and whatever kind of personal beliefs people have, like I said, I believe thoughts turn to things. Mm-hmm. I believe that everything changes. Yeah. I believe in divine timing. So for me, if there's a day, which of course, tapping into your professional mindset doesn't mean that every day is a great day. You have tough days, you have bad days, mm-hmm. but it's knowing that doesn't define your satisfaction in your job. And it's also knowing that there's something to be learned from it.
Mm-hmm. You hit a lot of great points. And one of the last factors you talked about, our CEO, Abdi Lejavardi, and we talk daily. And one of the things that we really truly believe, and it was kind of something you reflected on, is life happens for us. We can't control when certain things are going to happen, but how we want to take those things. If we have a positive mindset, I don't know, for me, I know this sounds, I don't know what word I want to use right now. I'm trying to keep it somewhat professional, but where I'm going with it is this. When I have the positive mindset, when something happens, my mind says, you know what, that happened to me for a reason. Whether it be good or bad, there is a way that I can now approach the situation. Due to recent events that and personal things that happened in life, I had a couple of days where it wasn't positive. I recognized it though, because I finally started working on that professional mindset. And I'll tell you, for many years, you talked about changing jobs and kind of different things there. There were many years where I changed positions or companies because I thought that by doing that, I would be happy. Found out that had nothing to do with my happiness, right? Sometimes the promotions, I love that story you shared from that book, Flow. If that person can work at Grease Monkey and be happy, God bless him or her. I mean, that's
they're a better citizen for it,
yes.
Because they're following what they love. It could be their goal, their entire life could be managing relationships with the local community. Mm-hmm. That is of equal value of any job, right? And yes. I think that's where our society is shifting of, you have to go to this 4-year university and get this job and make this amount of money. And like that, having a growth mindset goes against, in a lot of ways, mm-hmm. the way that what social norms are. So not to interrupt you, but I definitely, I had this vision of this manager that's just, people are bringing him Christmas cookies, but he's giving them holiday gifts because they mean as much to him as he means to them.
Yes, yes, and that's true. And I think that, you're right. Again, we could have another series that we could talk about or another session where we talk about the idea of that giving aspect in the mindset. But we'll stick to this one today. But I love it, and I'm sure that we'll have some more conversations and go with that. But what um, what do you think's the relationship? And again, I think that we kind of already discussed this. This is the great thing with conversation is we can have these open discussions. But what do you think's the relationship between a professional mindset and a personal mindset? And then there's a secondary to that. Do you think they can exist separately, or do they have to exist together?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I'm not a psychologist or,
Sure.
a sociologist, but this question was fascinating me because in a nutshell, what Amy Valentine believes is that mindset is mindset.
Mm-hmm.
That our mindset, how we apply our mindset, what we do with it, that's up to us. And I think it's absolutely possible. For me, it's do you have a growth mindset or do you have a fixed mindset?
Mm-hmm.
Now, where it differs is somebody who works in finance.
Mm-hmm.
Finance is more akin and tied to a fixed mindset. It's about results. It's about outcomes. It's about centralized power being around money, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that CFO, for example, they might have a fixed mindset in the workplace, but they might have a growth mindset out of the workplace.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that there's some careers and jobs where we're challenged to have to kind of flex through which pieces of this are going to work for me in this job and which pieces aren't.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that pie in the sky is to operate from the perspective of a growth mindset
Mm-hmm.
always. And then know that you can, if you have to be outcome focused, because that's part of your job, that you can. And that if you, even running a household, I think about, we have our neighbors in our neighborhood, they have 9 children, all under the age of 15.
Wow. Okay.
So they have to focus on outcomes and results sometimes to run the household.
Yes.
But that doesn't mean that it doesn't mean that fixed and growth can't exist in the same space. It just means you can take some components of it. But for me in my life, I think the ideal is growth mindset always. And then as I need to have a couple of those components, when you talk about fixed and growth, just in circles of conversation, fixed has a negative connotation with it because it's
absolutely
like I'm staunch, I'm steadfast, this is the way that I am. And growth is like, I'm open, like I'm a canvas, universe, direct me.
right.
But I think there could be some value. We don't learn unless we're focused on the outcomes, and maybe that doesn't work for us in work. We wouldn't learn. So there's a lot of growth to be had there. So I do think that we can show up in the workplace with a growth mindset without compromising who we are.
Mm-hmm.
I think I could see some business people saying, well, wait a minute, if I show up with a growth mindset, I'm going to lose control. Or they might think I'm vulnerable. And it's like, okay, if you're the CEO of a company and you say this company values mistakes, we're going to try to mitigate mistakes, but when we make mistakes, we're going to learn from them and we're all going to come together. That takes that traditional CEO role and makes that person vulnerable. But I think that's a great thing because it humanizes them.
Mm-hmm.
So again, I go back to, it's the awareness. It's who am I and how can I show up in my authentic self? And I think before that happens, people, are challenged with, what is my authentic self? What are my truths? Like, what are the things that I know that I can show up that come from that place of knowing?
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't have to be arduous. It can be fun. It's like, okay, well, who am I? Who am I as a professional? And what is my mindset? And just the awareness of it gets those wheels in motion. And I think
Absolutely.
that's the starting point.
Yeah. And I love your examples continually because again, I picture American Heritage College and what we're trying to do now. And I've come from the traditional top-down management level model. I've come from that, expectation having a business degree of you're supposed to know everything. And if you don't, oh my gosh, you don't know anything, right? There's that idea that you're not allowed to make mistakes, and that's unfortunate. Even as a former athlete, you're told, oh, don't make mistakes. We don't teach people that it is okay. And the one nice thing that we've been trying to do, and that's why I said we want to disrupt education a little bit at American Heritage College, is we want team members to make mistakes because it's okay. We learn, as we keep talking about, the growth mindset from mistakes. And that's the great thing. From the top down, we look at it from that perspective. And that's what I really enjoy about what we're doing. Um, and you're right. I think many organizations can learn from that. And it's very funny. I know this is a little bit anecdotal, but when I think about what we're going through with the pandemic right now and us being working from home, and I know you and I kind of talked about this offline before, but when it comes to us having animals, kids, all the different things, I think in some respects it's been a positive for some companies because we realize that, oh my goodness, I got this door open behind me. There could be a kid come out of it and you don't even know it, right? That's life. It's okay. It's a mistake. Big deal. Let's just move on, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that in some respects, that's given us that opportunity to sit back and reflect and maybe think about the happiness that we were speaking of earlier,
Yeah.
and what really makes us happy.
Yeah.
What do you think? What do you think, Amy, is the opposite of a professional mindset? And if you could share, what's an example you can think of?
So I think the opposite, I was going to make a joke, a non-funny joke, like the unprofessional mindset, right? Like,
Yes.
but I actually, have you ever heard that quote? I'm sure you have, that says that if you stand, I don't know, if you stand on the train tracks, you'll get run over.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Or sometimes making no decision is worse than making the wrong decision.
absolutely. Yes.
I think for me, the opposite of a professional mindset is autopilot mindset.
Yeah.
It's just, I'm gonna check it off the list. I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to move up the ladder. I'm going to, make more widgets. I think it's a profession just being a job
Mm-hmm.
and a means to an end. Well, at the same time, I don't suggest that people invest too much. You have to have work-life balance, right? And I think that's
Yes.
something that's critical. But there's so much learning through relationships, and we presumably spend 40, 50 hours a week at work, if not more, especially now in the pandemic, working from home.
Yes.
That the opposite is the autopilot. And then I'll take that one step further, and I don't know if this is the example or if this is a framework, but it's the growth mindset versus the fixed mindset.
Yes.
The fixed is, again, and I'm a glass is overflowing, so I don't think that fixed is necessarily bad. I'm not like, oh, you have a fixed mindset, that's terrible. Not at all. It's an opportunity for growth. So fixed mindset is that I'm focused on the outcomes, focused on the results.
Mm-hmm.
Failure scares me. And then it's centralized power. The growth mindset values risks. It's okay with mistakes. Encourages and fosters idea generation. It's a team approach.
Yeah.
And so those two examples, I think, are a framework that anyone who's interested in learning more, they can Google that, because that does not come from Amy Valentine. That comes from
Right.
industrial psychologists and psychologists that have been, I think it was Carol Dweck maybe that had come up with the idea originally. And I think going back to the example of, the CEO that took his life because he presumably lost it all. And then the manager at Grease Monkey, who was very, very authentically happy. And that those are two very different examples. And what it led the author to do was study people in difficult situations. So
Mm-hmm.
he did several case studies on concentration camps during the
Oh, wow.
Holocaust.
Yeah.
And he said, what did the survivors have in common? And what he found, and again, this is very simplified version, was that the most common factor was that they had a positive attitude and they figured out some coping mechanism to deal with it. So he talked about one family where they treated it like it was a game. They told their
Hmm.
children that they were in a game and their goal was to get out of the game, and they lived.
Wow. That is, wow. That's amazing. I had never heard that. That's very interesting way to look at it. Yeah. I think it goes back to the, like you say, the positivity, but also I think it's that for me, when I practice the mindfulness side of things, for me, it's the fact that I can't control everything and I just have to accept that there are going to be things that I can't do anything about, and being
Mm-hmm.
able to leave that outside of what goes on up here. And I appreciate
Mm-hmm.
that. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Mm-hmm.
Um, one last question. Can you share your perspective about the main ways in which people can shift their mindset, including one on the job, especially if they struggle in their role?
Yeah. Yeah. I was thinking through that because each person is going to have a different pathway, a different
Mhm.
journey. But I came up with this, I call it the ABCs.
Okay.
The ABCs. I love analogies and I love acronyms, and they're easy to remember. So if we have these three buckets, if we have A, we have B, and we have C. And bucket
Mhm.
A is awareness. I believe that some people say awareness is 90% of growth. Some people say it's 60%. I don't know what the percentage is, Terry, but I will tell you awareness is more than the majority.
Yeah.
Once you're aware that, oh, I could be happier in my job, even if my job stays the same, my mindset really has the potential to influence
Yeah.
how I show up at work. Then that's the ground is fertile. To me, the ground is fertile.
Yeah.
And it's just being open. It's not holding on so steadfast to, well, it has to be this way because it's always been that way. Or
Yeah.
if I don't have them clock in and clock out in the time clock, then I'll never be able to really know what they were doing. So it's breaking free of those constraints. And then B is kind of the seeds. Those are the seeds that are planted on the soil, and that's belief system, values, priorities.
Mm.
That's the knowing of you.
Mhm.
So what do I believe to be true? What do I know to be true? And that's the seeds, because then you're opening your mind. You're getting to know yourself.
Sure. Yeah.
And then the C, I mean, the C could be a couple different things, but it's really that challenges are
Mhm.
lessons and gifts. Now that's a very specific thing. That's not like a self-exploration. That's more of a mantra or something really, a truth to consider.
Mhm.
It's something I've seen time and time again in the workplace, that challenges, we have to put it over here. We have to push it down. Someone will blow up at somebody about it.
Mhm.
And to your point, like you just said, when difficult things happen, sometimes we can take those challenges and put them in a box and put the
Mhm.
box on the shelf. I mean, if you're a surgeon and something's going wrong in the operating room, you need to call in backup, right? So we need to know
Right.
when to call in backup. But if a decision doesn't need to be made in that moment, we can stop. And I had a mentor who told me this years ago, and it's worked really well for me. When you find yourself in a tough position, someone's saying things to you that feel uncomfortable, or you're in a space that in work that you feel like you're being attacked, whatever it is, to stop, take a deep breath, and say, interesting. Interesting.
Yeah.
Because it buys you time to not come from the reactionary mode, and you can just take a minute, especially if no one's asking you of anything. It's like,
Right.
okay, something terrible, something, bad that happens. It's like, gosh, that's really hard, or that's interesting. So those challenges, we can deal with them then, or we can wait. And so that's the C of it. And that's really what, what blooms from it. And that the little S, ABC's apostrophe little S, is that the silver linings. There's silver linings in every situation if we let ourselves see them. They're there. They're there every day, all day. It's just a matter of us being attuned and accustomed to seeing them.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, no pun intended here, but that is very interesting. So I appreciate that. No, that's actually, because it brings me, when you were speaking of that, the idea or example that came to mind, and I would agree with this. Abdi and I will often talk about, people saying, well, let me play devil's advocate. Do you really need to play devil's advocate? Are we overthinking it? Can we just look at it? We know that, again, as you stated, there are going to be negative things or challenges that are going to happen. I would rather people have solutions versus saying, well, you know what? Let me tell you what is going to happen if we don't do this, right?
Or let me tell you why that's not going to work.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
That's not solutions, right? But I don't, one thing I always tell people when it comes to the series and just in life in general is, when I'm talking to people, I'm not perfect by any means. I tell you, the growth mindset or the professional mindset has to be worked on every day of life. I think back, we've been talking and you've shared examples about business life and even home life and how we are different. I tell you, I'm constantly trying to improve as a parent, and that is a difficult one when it comes to mindset. But some might ask, well, why are you talking about that? Because that does carry over. As much as we want to say it doesn't, it does carry over into our working life. And again, especially now that many of us are doing it from home, it's not like you have the office to go to and kind of, like you said, put it on the shelf. You kind of have to deal with it. So, from my perspective, I think it is that growth mindset that we have to work on every day. So, I love your stories. I love your examples. I love your view of mindset. I hope that someday I can get to where my water and my glass are overflowing. That's a great goal to have. So that's something I want to work on. One last thing before I let you go for the day. Is there anything, Amy, that you would like to share about, I know I gave the introduction and everything and I shared the wonderful things you do, but is there anything about your organization or what you do that you would like to share before we end the call?
Yeah, just to wrap it up. First of all, I'm so lucky and fortunate to be able to run an organization that's a nonprofit that's focused on increasing access and equity in the education system for all students, and to put teachers back in positions of power so that they can recraft what teaching looks like in their classroom. So I would say, I would encourage people to be a part of the work that we do. We provide all of our research for free. We give scholarships to kids and grants to teachers. And sometimes people will say, well, what's the catch? And I say, there isn't one. We really are that altruistic. And one of our mantras internally is learning is at the core of the human spirit, which goes back to the heart of this series, professional mindset. Learning is at the core, growing is at the core. And so anyone who's, wants to follow us, I would encourage you to. You can reach out to me. If I said anything in this interview that you wanted me to expand on, or you just wanted to pick my brain on, feel free to reach out to me, and you can make my contact information available to listeners.
That's wonderful. And I definitely can do that on our Facebook page, on our LinkedIn page, when we post the video. I would love to be able to share your information. So we can definitely do that. Amy, thank you for your time, for being on the show or the series. I really appreciate it. I always enjoy our conversations. And I love it, and I can't wait to continue to kind of disrupt the educational process.
Thank you. This was so wonderful. Absolutely. What a way to start the week.
I love it. I love it. Exactly. All right. Well, I appreciate everybody that has logged in, listened to the series. If you don't get a chance to listen to the series, it definitely will be showing on Facebook Live and YouTube, and you can access it anytime. Just find us at American Heritage College on YouTube or on our Facebook page, American Heritage College. Thank you all, and we'll talk to you soon, Amy.
Thank you. Have a
All
great
right.
day.